HR Research presents our 2014 webinar series, delivering you the latest in HR news, legislative updates, and industry trends. As a provider of leading talent screening, management, and assessment solutions, we are here to ensure your company's continued success. Global HR Research. We redefine your HR expectations.
Hi everyone, my name is Megan Schamfelter and I'm the Manager of Communications and Events here at Global HR Research, a leading provider in talent screening, talent assessments, talent acquisition solutions. For the past 4 years, Global HR Research has been ranked as one of the top providers of background screening, drug testing, and pre-hire assessment solutions by HRO Today magazine. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today for our webinar entitled Background Checks for Contractors and Transportation. Today's webinar will be presented by Christine Peacock, Director of Strategic Relations with Global HR Research. This will be a silent webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the questionnaire box and we will respond throughout the presentation. Questions may take longer answers or that are more specific we can answer at the end or via email 24 to 74 hours after the completion of the webinar. Also in this timeline, the entire contents of the presentation will be available on our website at www.ghrr.com. At this time, I'd like to thank Christine for being here today, and I'll turn this over to her so she can start the webinar.
Perfect. Okay, I appreciate that, guys. Okay, well, let's get started here. We've got a lot of information that we've got to cover in the next hour. First and foremost, I do want to make sure that everyone understands today's webinar is for informational and educational purposes. Please don't deem it as legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not legal counsel, but I will give you kind of an introduction of who I am so you can understand why I'm on today's webinar. So again, I'm Christine Peacock. I am the Director of Strategic Relations here at Global. I've been in this industry for about 6 years. My primary responsibilities are education and consultation of current and prospective clients. I did, for those of you that are on the line, used to be Christine Wynn. So if you're wondering, man, this voice sounds familiar, I'm the same person, just different name. And then of course, I have 3 dogs. So just a little bit about me. But like I said, I'm going to go through today's presentation just based on conversations I've had in the past. You're going to hear some reiterations of some things, if specifically if you guys are current clients or if you have been on my webinars before. I'll sound kind of like a broken record on some aspects, but I do want to make sure that I'm clear, concise, and appropriate. Again, if you have questions, type them into the questionnaire box and Megan and I will get started with those. So first and foremost, we have a lot, again, to pack in an hour's worth of time, but I want to start first with the nature of a database. Again, for those of you that have been in my webinars before, you're probably going, wait, I've heard this before. I think it's very important, specifically in this industry. I know that most of you have high turnover. You know, you're looking at kind of a cost savings to understand, you know, if I'm going to hire someone today and my percent turnover is 40, 50, 60%, I don't want to spend, you know, $70 to $150 on a background check. I completely understand that. I just want to make sure that we're all talking the same lingo here. So let's talk about the nature of a criminal database. They do come in many forms. You can get them at a national level or a state level. Understand at a national level, it's owned by the private sector. It's not at all regulated and it's not at all accurate. It is marketed for appeal. You want to call it sex appeal, you want to call it whatever it is. Vendors in our industry will call them a million different things. They're going to call it the super search, a national scan, a national and a local check. I've heard state and federal crimes. Well, great. What do you actually get? Because Global HR Research may call it a national criminal database. Someone else may call it a national scan. Essentially, it's the same thing. I mean, if you really think about it, it is what it is, right? It's a database of information. Databases are only as good as the information that's collected and provided to you, right? Guys, a national criminal database has roughly anywhere between 200 million records to, 350 million records, depending on your carrier. It's just records. Again, it's not regulated, it's not accurate, it's not up to date, okay? So let's just simplify this real quick. I want to give you kind of an example. If John Doe is convicted of a crime you should know that 100% of the time it's recorded at the local level, or what we'll call a county level, okay? In some cases, it's held at a state repository in the states that even offer a repository. For example, California doesn't even hold a state repository that's available to the public, meaning to you, to consumer reporting agencies like Global HR, it just doesn't exist. The other aspect that you have to ask yourself is, how often is it updated, even if at all? So if they do submit the information to a database, do they do it one time? If someone is charged and then later found innocent, is that updated? And then in the same aspect, it's sometimes held in a national database. And the question you have to ask yourself is, how often is it updated, if at all? To think about this, I'm going to go back here. When you look at criminal databases, again, it's owned by the private sector. So companies like Global HR Research, we have our own proprietary database. We purchase the data. Okay. Well, I'll be upfront with you guys. Some counties, some locations will give it to us on a regular basis, daily, weekly, some monthly, some never at all. You get a one-time purchase and they're done, right? So it's kind of misleading when someone says to you, well, we're going to give you a national everything. There is no such thing. But I kind of talked about the negative part, and I realized after looking back at some of the webinars I've done in the past, I do want to talk about the positives of a national criminal database. Number one, it's inexpensive. It is quick turnaround. Anytime you're dealing with databases, most oftentimes the turnaround time is instant, and it's a great safety net. Again, those of you that are current clients, you've probably heard me preach before, oh, well, county level, county. You know, do criminal background checks based on the population of where the person has lived, been associated, worked, went to school, the whole thing. Well, if we really think about this, you could commit a crime outside of the places you've lived, worked, or went to school. It makes sense. You go on vacation, you drive a little, I don't know. So it's a great safety net because, again, it's inexpensive, it's quick turnaround, and it's a great way to capture criminal, or possibly capture criminal history outside of the locations that pre-populate. And then, of course, there's hundreds of thousands of criminal cases in one place. All right. I want to talk about benefits of a state repository. To be honest, I don't normally suggest this type of search or product unless you're in an industry that requires it. Again, some of them can be very timely. In some cases, it can be, instant, 24 hours, 3 business days. Others, it can be up to 3 to 4 to 6 weeks to get any type of results back. And again, we're still talking about inaccuracies here. But again, if you think about it, it is another safety net. If I decided to travel within the same state and commit a crime, then you have that extra kind of gusto. But again, it's less expensive to do the National Criminal Database than it is a state repository. So unless you're in that industry that requires you to, and from my understanding, everyone on the line today kind of checked you out, I don't believe that you need to. Some counties do, if you really think about it, will submit their information to a state agency, but they also won't resell it to a private sector for the National Criminal Database. This is not the majority of the time, but it can happen. I'm talking probably less than 2% does this ever happen. And then sometimes they'll sell it to a private sector for a one-time data dump without an update. Okay. Again, guys, any questions, comments, feel free to type them into the questionnaire box. I want to talk about legalities real quick because I've talked to you about databases and all this stuff and why it's negative. I want to back it up, right? Because it's not just Christine's opinion. I want to show you guys that the text really isn't black and white when it comes to databases. There's 2 sections as a part of the FCRA. FCRA stands for the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It's what regulates background screening, whether you do them in-house or Global HR Research does them for you, or whoever your vendor is, if a background screening firm is doing them. So 607 says, accuracy of a report. Whenever a consumer reporting agency, so that's a vendor like us, prepares a consumer report, which would be a background check, it shall follow reasonable procedures to assure maximum possible accuracy of the information concerning the individual, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I obviously highlighted reasonable procedures to assure maximum possible accuracy. The other section that's in highlight of database types checks is 613. The vendor must maintain strict procedures to basically provide you up-to-date and complete data. Okay, so if I think about this, let's get real here. Reasonable. I'm a dictionary.com person. Everyone here at our corporate office and even my closest friends can tell you I'm like addicted to it. I always seem to look it up and really figure out what does that really mean. So when they say reasonable measures according to dictionary.com is agreeable to reason or sound judgment, logical. Okay, we can argue what's logical, right? I can argue with you what's a logical process that I'm obtaining criminal history, and your version and my version may be different, but to us, it's reasonable. But what's accuracy? The condition of quality of being true, correct, and exact. I really don't think we can argue that, right? Like 1 + 1 we know equals 2. 1 + 1 + 1 equals 3. Can't really argue it. That's the facts. They're true. It's exact. Strict, closely or rigorously enforced or maintained. So that means all of the time, right? Not, well, sometimes we do this and sometimes we do this. So again, if I go back to my description of a database, sometimes they're updated, sometimes they're not. So those aren't strict enforcements, right? And what does up to date mean? Believe it or not, dictionary.com had up to date. Extending to the present time, current, right? Including the latest information or facts. I'm going to go back here. National criminal databases. They're not regulated. They're not accurate. So how does this work? How is this in compliance with what we say of 607 and 613? It's how your vendor takes that database information and provides that data back to you. Okay? So let's look at this. Well, before I do this, one of the things that I'm always going to encourage you guys to do, whether you are a current client of Global HR Research or you're using someone else, go back to your vendor and ask them how they are managing database results to you. It's very key and important because just looking at the text of the federal language that regulates, consumer reporting agencies like us, we've got to make sure we have reasonable and strict procedures to provide you the most up-to-date and accurate information. Databases aren't that way. Now, if I look at my screen here, here's what happened. HireRate, which is a very large consumer reporting agency, you can probably call them like one of the Walmarts of our industry. August of 2012, they were in violation of multiple things, but specifically 607, and they paid $2.6 million. Another CRA, August of 2013, another violation of Section 607, paid $3.5 million. Walt Disney found themselves at the end of last year in kind of a suit alongside their CRA for violating Section 607. IntelliCorp, another large consumer reporting agency, at the end of last year is going to pay $18.6 million in a settlement because of their violating 607. And Telecheck, beginning of this year, they do more of like credit services, but they were still providing database information, so $3.5 million. So we look at this, it's not like I'm telling you something that isn't happening. It's happening. Go back to your vendor and ask them how they're providing you that data, because on the next slide, how does it affect you? I just showed you how it affects our industry, and these are some large organizations. This isn't Joe Schmo background screening who's around the corner from you. Pepsi, at the beginning of 2012, had a class action lawsuit for using minor offenses for eligibility. Well, they were getting database information from their vendor. There were other things that Pepsi did as well. I'll give you that. But at the end, they paid $3.13 million in their settlement, not including all the legal action, not including all of the extra steps they had to take thereafter. They estimated about $8-point-something million in total cost with it would cost them for this one distribution center here in the U.S. Right? I think it was in Minnesota. So after that happened, I'm sure you guys are aware. You guys are in HR. Lobbyists kind of said, "Wait, EEOC, you're going after some of the larger organizations who have their policies together, they know what they're doing, and yet they've lost this major civil action lawsuit." So the EEOC said, okay, In April, they published something called the Guidelines to Criminal History. Granted, this doesn't say requirements, it says guidelines. It's not required of you. You're not, you're not restricted to only utilizing their guidelines, but I guarantee you, if you're not taking their recommendations, they're coming after you, because I'm going to have a couple steps or a couple examples here underneath. But they published it February of 2012, and it basically says no matter what you get back from your background screening firm or whatever information you're obtaining internally, you've got to do individualized assessments. How does that relate to the job position? How many offenses are they within a 7-year time frame? How long ago were those offenses? Does the person have an explanation of what that information means? If you aren't aware of this, you haven't read it, you can Google kind of summaries of the individualized assessments or guidelines to the criminal history. It's about 89 pages long. It's quite of a boring read, but you can find some good summaries there. And I think we also have a webinar that our legal team did in reference to these specific guidelines. And Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think our legal team will be doing another webinar in the future specifically about individualized assessments. Is that correct?
Correct. That'll be our mid-year in the fall.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Megan. All right, so how does this affect you? BMW, a distribution center out of South Carolina, they are still in the middle of the civil action lawsuit, but it is about their use of criminal history. They're doing database checks on some of their distribution fellows, and they're talking about how the nature of the database works and how it relates to the job function of the individual. At the exact same date, the EEOC also released another civil action lawsuit against Dollar General for the same exact thing. And something that's going to be more specific to y'all's industry is JB Hunt Transport. The way that the FTC and the EEOC describe them as one of the largest or larger transportation organizations worldwide, they are currently facing a civil action lawsuit, or I'm sorry, they settled. They wouldn't obviously disclose the amount because it was a settlement, but it was the use of criminal history. Roughly 14,000 employees were affected nationwide for them. So they had to go back, reoffer positions, do training. It was a mess. I mean, they're still dealing with it now today. So it's really important that although the EEOC doesn't regulate companies like Global HR Research or the background screening industry, we're your partner. That's what we're supposed to be. So your background screening firm should truly understand how this affects you, because ultimately when you get these results, you've got to use them. So let's talk about best practice criminal background checks. Number one, trust your vendor. I keep saying this, but you want to vet them and you want to salt them. So what does that mean? What I always say good practice when I talk to our current or even prospective clients is salt your vendor. Submit 1 or 2 every other quarter, once a month, however you want to, how often ever you want to do it, and just submit known criminals to them. See what comes back. Submit things that you know will have adverse action. See what comes back. Do it. You should get in the practice of doing it all the time. It should be a part of your policies. You just want to vet out your vendors. Look at your database policies or ask your vendor for their database policies and how they adhere to section 607 and 613. Review your packages. Please review your adjudication matrix, specifically if you have not done so since April of 2012. I will give you a real life story. So the guidelines to criminal history requires that you do an individualized assessment of each thing that comes back, right? And before you make eligibility determinations of a candidate. Our team here at Global HR Research just completed an RFP for a very large firm. You're talking they have roughly 65,000 employees. Well, not very large, but huge enough. And one of the things that they asked was an adjudication matrix of green, yellow, and red. Well, that's great, but the green, yellow, and red said eligible, review, and not eligible. And they wanted Global HR Research to basically put these individuals into buckets based on that matrix. Guys, this is not good. It's not good, because what you're showing the EEOC is that you're not looking at these individually. You're not having the individualized assessment with each of your candidates. You're just going, okay, you have a felony, you're not eligible. Okay, you have 3 DUIs, you're not eligible. What the EEOC is going to ask is, how long ago did they have the felony? When did they have the DUIs? Was it 7 years ago? Was it recent? Was it 10 years ago? What happened? How does it relate to their job function as well? So again, read the EEOC guidelines and make sure you do those individualized assessments. All right. Again, you guys have questions, type them into the questionnaire box and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. So this is what we always suggest for a best criminal package. Again, those of you on the line that are current clients, your packages that you're currently using is probably very similar to this. The Social Security trace and address history, this is an investigative tool to help point where you should look for criminal history. The National Criminal Database, the sex offender, and the OFAC, this is what I call the trifecta of databases. I don't care what vendor you're talking about. When they call it a national criminal database, when they call it a national scan or a super search, I've even seen like a three database search or something like that. This essentially is what you're getting. Okay, it's proprietary. They own the data, and it's instantly back to you, and it's relatively inexpensive. But as I said, doesn't adhere to Section 607 and 613. I encourage you guys, specifically in this industry, to start adding in national federal criminal checks. A lot of you have federal contracts or federal regulation. You need to be doing this. Federal crimes versus state crimes are very different. I think, unfortunately, most people think, okay, well, it's federal. It must be really huge crimes. I should be doing this. I'll give you a couple examples. The Boston Marathon bomber, in the very beginning, there was a lot in the media that they asked, okay, are we going to prosecute him through the state of Massachusetts, or are we going to prosecute him through the federal government? Is he a terrorist or is he a murderer? So we as a U.S. government have chosen to prosecute him as a terrorist. So at this point, he's being prosecuted at a federal level. I'm just going to pretend that guy, I don't remember his name right this moment, or I can't pronounce it. Let's pretend he doesn't get charged and convicted. Probably won't happen, but let's pretend. And then he applies for a position with your organization, and you don't have a federal check. You will never find out about it. Another example, Martha Stewart, her crimes were federal offenses. Right? OJ is a great example. OJ, also a federal offense. So just a couple things that you might want to consider if you're not already doing a federal check on top of your packages, that you add that in. It's a great search. It's relatively inexpensive. It can check, unlike a national database where it's not regulated. The National Federal Criminal Check is regulated by the federal government. It's called a PACER search, P-A-C-E-R. And most all of your vendors have access to that. But of course, your local checks, have them based on address history and where they lived, worked, or went to school. Again, I think the key of what I've heard in the contractors and transportation industry is, I don't want to spend a lot of money. I get it. And some of you have chosen that, well, I only want to do 2 counties, or the county they currently live in, or whatever it is. Guys, you're going to miss something. And the point being is, how much is it actually going to cost you at the end? Okay. Let's talk about, before I do that, do you guys have any questions on the best practice? To add to what I said was, how much is it going to cost you at the end? Guys, SHRM did a poll. This is in 2008. So I'm sure it has increased substantially since then. But this statistic keeps popping out in my head. In 2008, they did a poll of some of the largest organizations, and then they did a poll of medium-sized organizations. And a negligent hire, on average, cost organizations $10 million per one. $10 million. So you spend an extra $20 on a background check, extra $5, extra $10. It might be worthwhile, then end up with, something at the very end. Okay. This, for some reason, staged background screening is very popular in this industry, so I want to discuss kind of the pros and cons. If you don't understand what staged means, it's just basically meaning I'm going to take my background check package and I'm going to divide it into 2. So the example would be, stage 1, I want to do a Social Security trace and inexpensive items, things that are quick, easy turnaround. National criminal, sex offender, OFAC, driving history. If that person successfully, what I'll call passes that first round, then I'll spend the extra money on counties, education, employment, drug tests, so on and so forth. It is a great idea. Let's talk about benefits. On stage 1, it's great. It's instant. It's inexpensive. It gives you a preliminary glance at criminal history. Stage 2, perfect. You go more into depth, and it doesn't process without, again, in quotes, passing stage 1. So you're saving this. Let's pretend we divide this in two. Let's call this a $50 package. $25 for stage 1, $25 for stage 2. They don't pass stage 1, you only pay $25. That makes sense. Caution. Look at what's in stage 1. It's database checks. So these still need adjudication verification, meaning if something comes back from these databases in accordance to 607 and 613, we have to provide you up-to-date and accurate records. We can't do this based on stage 1. At least your vendor shouldn't be doing that for you, right? I've seen a million different things. I've seen people go, well, stage 1 will come back and it'll tell me there's a possible hit or record or further investigation is needed. Do you want to move forward? Guys, let's be honest. You can't erase that from your brain, right? Like I have this picture. I don't know if any of you have seen Men in Black. It's one of my favorite movies, which is strange. But I love the movie because I would love one of those little things that Will Smith has. They just click it in front of you and all of a sudden you don't remember a thing. It's like, oh, I can't be held liable. I don't remember. The difference is someone says to you, let's pretend it's John Doe and Christine Peacock. Me and John Doe. We're applying for the same position. Background check comes back, stage 1. I'm clear. Stage 2 is already starting to go forward. Automatic, right? Great. John Doe, stage 1, something comes up and it says further investigation is needed. You need someone to start tomorrow. What are you going to do? Can you erase that from your brain? Can you say, you know what? I'll pretend that I didn't know that further investigation was needed because you don't actually have the crimes in front of you. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I've seen some vendors give those results to you and then let you make the decision on whether or not you want the up-to-date information. That's not your responsibility. That's the responsibility of the vendor. We just went over that, right? Section 607 and 613. What they're doing is passing the liability off back on you and saying, oh, if I let you make the decision, then it's on you. You're the one who didn't want up-to-date or accurate information. Well, again, not your decision to make. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second and make sure that no one has any questions for me. I know I talk really fast. I'm sorry. If you do have questions, type.
No questions, Christine.
Thank you, Megan, so much.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about reading contractual requirements. I think this is huge because I've probably seen everything from under the sun, and I really don't understand some of these things, why they make them so convoluted, because you as the individual trying to uphold your contracts, I don't know what you guys are doing, because if you really think about it, sometimes they're relative, sometimes they're exact, right? For some reason, they also want you to decipher vendor-specific verbiage. For example, I've had individuals send me a contract that says, oh, well, you must do a national scan. What the heck is that? What does it include? Is it a national criminal database? Is it a national criminal database, the sex offender, and the OFAC? Does it include the social security trace? What is it? So what happens is some of your, clients that you're contracted to, they'll have a vendor who they're doing a specific background check, and they'll say, okay, we want our contractors to do literally the exact same thing. And they'll copy and paste that right into their contracts with you. And then you guys are forced to figure out what the heck that means, how you're supposed to get it done, and what they're looking for, right? Let's look at one. This one says, a background check must be conducted prior to accessing premises, etc. What does that mean? A background check. Well, a background check could be a national criminal database and a sex offender. It could be counties. I mean, you guys have been through this. It could be literally the difference of a $10 check to a $100 check. This doesn't mean a lot. So what I'm going to revert back to you guys is protect yourselves. Risk mitigation, because at the end of the day, it's your employee. So do a best practice package. If it just says a background check, don't skip out on the cost because you know that it's going to cost you, $10 versus $50. These are always fun. I don't care what type of background check you do, but no felony convictions for the last 7 years before they can use or be on our premises. What? This is recent. This was published. I wish I put the date on here. This was published February of 2014 for a very large wireless carrier is the best way I can put that. Obviously, you can see that I took out the company info, right? They're a wireless carrier. And this is what they said. And I thought to myself, no felony convictions. How are they adhering to EEOC regulations? Because if you try to deny someone employment, who's at fault? You or the contractor? You can't say, or the client. You can say, well, my client doesn't want you to have felony convictions. What does it have to do with anything? So really look at these contracts very carefully. I would advise you guys to go back to your current vendor and say, help me figure this out. How am I going to be in compliance? And some of them are really, really clear. Like this one, This one is for the state of Pennsylvania education system. Obviously, I didn't wipe them out because it's public record, but they give you 3 things. Number 1, you must do a Pennsylvania State Police request if you were going to contract to us. That's basically a state repository. Number 2, you must do a Department of Public Welfare Child Abuse Registry or history clearance. Okay, I know where to get that from. I know what to do. And number 3, you have to do a CHRI, which is fingerprinting. Makes sense, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts. However, it doesn't mean that you can't do more, right? Just because it gives you the exact same 3 doesn't mean that you can't do more to protect yourselves. Because again, these are your employees. You're not giving your employees to your client, right? You're still responsible. You're still the decision maker of eligibility. It's still you. So do what protects you, right? I can't tell you the client, but I have a client who is here in the state of Florida. I'll give you that. And their healthcare. And for a long time, healthcare regulation was only that they had to do a state repository. Well, like I said earlier, state repositories aren't always accurate or up to date. On top of that, they only required they do Florida's state repository. Well, any of you that are in Florida, been to Florida, or know about Florida, you guys know not everyone that lives here is from Florida. So unfortunately, what happened, they hired a CNA. How the licensing board didn't catch this, I have no idea. But they hired a CNA who had committed multiple sexual abuses in another state. But because they did the minimum, right? They did the minimum. Well, they got fined because it was their employee. Basically, the legal aspect said, we don't care what your minimum was. You didn't do the due diligence for risk mitigation of your own processes to ensure the safety of your patients, your staff, blah, 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 blah. They lost. All right. This was a smaller healthcare system. It cost them roughly about $2 million in total. It almost shut them down. I don't know. I mean, what happened was, well, that's what happened. And then they came to us thereafter. They said, okay, now we need to outsource this because we need more than just the minimum. And that's how I found out about that. I've been working with them for now 5 years, and they're better now, but it was a task. They didn't understand, okay, well, this is what the contract says, this is what I have to do. Doesn't mean that they can't do more. Oh, I guess there. Here we go. I should have gone to this slide. Contractual agreements don't say you can't do more. These are minimums. Don't be afraid to protect yourselves, and then work with your CRA and best practices to fulfill. Guys, we're the experts here on background screening. Your background screening firm should be the expert. If they know what they're doing, they know what they're doing. Send them your contracts. Say, help me figure out, can I build a package that will keep me in compliance of this specific contract? They should be able to do it for you. And then, of course, calculate what is your current cost for your background check, even if it's your minimums, versus what a loss contract would be. Now, I know I keep talking about risk mitigation, but if I take in, for example, that one contract that said no felonies, and you're doing a $10 check and you miss criminal records and something happens on site, they run a more extensive background check on your guy or girl, and they find out, hey, this person had multiple felonies. I know I hate to say that example, but let's just pretend to use that one contract. Multiple felonies 3 years ago. Well, guess what? You lost the contract. It's not even about risk mitigation for your organization. It's about losing business. So do your due diligence up front, right? All right. Any questions so far? Okay, I'll keep going. Next, I want to talk about DOT employment verifications and what that looks like when you outsource them. Again, this webinar is for contractors and transportation. Most oftentimes you're having to do DOT employment verifications. I want to say first, trust me, I know. These are all the things that we've heard before. I'm required to do these, so we do them ourselves. Okay. I just have to show an attempt to obtain the information. I also understand that. These take a long time, and I don't want to hold up the rest of the background check. I get that as well. We have to ask different questions than a normal employment or reference check. Also understand that. And there's a lot of documentation required. Guys, we know. And I'm not saying we as in Global HR Research. Your vendor knows. We understand that these are different. We understand that these take time. We understand that you have to show some type of work. Outsource it. Get the liability off of you. Everything that you would do, we should do, or your vendor should do. We should be an extension of your process. Have that conversation with your vendor, right? Ask about, what are your verified and completed rates for your DOT, specifically for your DOT. They should be able to track those because those are very different than employment verifications. Ask them what their average turnaround time is. What are the exceptions to the rules? And how do they document their attempts? Because again, if you're required to do them, you could be audited. We also have to be able to show, we as in your vendor, have to be able to show you our documentation of our attempts, the results, so on and so forth. The main thing is get some time back to your schedule. If you're going to outsource background screening, drug testing, criminal, all this stuff, do your DOTs. Do it. Focus on the other things that are more important to you or are sitting on your desk and piling up and you just don't know when you're going to get to it. And then, of course, reduce your liability. You're outsourcing it, vet your vendor, and trust your vendor. And I, which is odd, am running right on time, which is great because I'm normally rushing at the very end. So I might be able to give you guys back some of your time. But I do want to talk about driving history reports, how and whens, expectations, myths, and truths of running these annual MVRs. First and foremost, you can run MVRs every day if you wanted to, but most oftentimes you'll see them run monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, okay? You can do individually processed, meaning you can do them one at a time. You can do batch processing, and even some companies will have a driver or fleet monitoring system. Here's my little pitch here. Global HR Research does have an MVR alert system. And the cool thing about these systems is there's automation involved. Meaning if you have 500 drivers or you have 5,000 drivers, the system should be able to monitor these individuals. They should be able to say, okay, if we're running these based on anniversary date and we hire Megan in January and Christine in February, well, every January we're going to run Megan's MVR, and every February we're going to run Christine's, right? Now, here's the thing. The myths about running MVRs is my employees will tell me that their license gets suspended, revoked, or expired. They'll be upfront and honest with me. So I know to revoke their abilities to drive our company vehicle. That's not really a myth. You guys know that, right? Running MVRs once a year will save me money in the long run. Will it? What happens if someone does have a suspended, revoked, or expired license? I've had clients call me before and go, what do I do? My guy just got pulled over and he doesn't have a license. You guys ran an MVR 3 months ago. I'll go, yeah. And 3 months ago, he had a valid license, but he doesn't today. There's nothing that I can do for you, right? And then we have everything tracked on an Excel sheet and it works out great. Guys, that's great. But as you get bigger, and again, this is a small, tiny portion of your job function. We get it. Outsource it to your vendor. See what options they have, specifically if they have a driver management system or a fleet management system. The cool thing about this is you can run MVRs, again, based on an anniversary date. You can outsource the automation. What's cool is you can do the feed. So for example, let's say you have 500 drivers and you have high turnover. You're going, how the heck am I going to keep 500 drivers up to date in this system if I outsource it? My Excel document works. I just take them off the thing. I don't worry about it. Well, have a feed, so an integration for your payroll where it adds in new drivers and terminates drivers. Because when you add them in, then that's their anniversary date. Automate it. Another example, there's a healthcare system out of Utah that's utilizing our MVR alert system. They run them semi-annually, and they also do active monitoring. Some states have abilities to where it's kind of like an inquiry. You go, okay, I ran Christine's driver's license in February. It's March. Hey, Florida, can you tell me, has there been a change to Christine's license since February? State of Florida is going to come back and say yes or no, right? There's either a change or there isn't a change. If there is a change, most of these fleet or driver management systems will have the ability to say, okay, can you now send me the new report so we can look to see what the differences are? The states that you list below are the states that have availabilities to this. Over the next I'll say 2 to 5 years, you'll see more and more states providing this type of service or allowing this type of service because it just makes it easier for you guys. So instead of waiting an entire year, or even if you're doing it semi-annually, 6 months, to find out if someone's license is suspended, if we're doing this on a monthly basis, guess what? You're checking monthly and the cost is very minimal. I'm talking like 1 cent to 10 cents a driver each month. So for 500 drivers, what is that? Let's call it's 1 cent. I can't even calculate it today. 10 cents, $50 a month extra for me just to go, hey, can I see if anything's changed? Anything changed my driver? No, we're good. Okay, keep moving on. All right. So that is my presentation today on background screening for contractors and transportation. I am here to answer any of your questions that you guys may have, whether it is in regulation to what I talked about today. I can clarify anything specific about your industry. I'm going to stay quiet here, and then Megan, you let me know if any questions come through. But I do want to thank you guys for joining. You can contact me directly. My email address and phone number and extension is on your screen.